She was the first woman to run for president of the United States who spent election night in jail and went down in history as a prostitute. She was a free lover who simultaneously lived with 2 husbands and was penned by the press as Mrs. Satan, a Wall Street broker who was also a self-proclaimed communist, a whistleblower who sparked one of the biggest scandals of the 19th century, and a psychic medium. But despite all of this, or perhaps because of it, most Americans have never heard of her. After nearly 150 years since her presidential run, is the world finally ready for Victoria Woodhull? Born Victoria Claflin in a shack in Homer, Ohio in 1838, she was one of 10 children to a father who was a snake oil salesman and a mother who was clinically insane. Little Victoria was prone to daydreaming, and despite the hopelessness of her situation, often dreamed of herself accomplishing great things. She only had 3 years of education, but during those years, she was called Queen Victoria by her classmates, as she shared a name and a demeanor with the current Queen of England. Her dreams soon turned into spiritual visitations, and her father saw an opportunity to make money off of her and her sister, Tennessee, who also possessed spiritual gifts, by hawking them as child psychics to support the family. Another one of Victoria's dreams was to escape her abusive home into the arms of a loving husband and soulmate. This seemed to come true when she, at age 15, met a handsome doctor who wanted to marry her. However, after their wedding night, her dreams were quickly dashed as she realized he was a non-functioning alcoholic and habitually unfaithful, and barely even a doctor. Rude contact with facts chased my visions and dreams away quickly, and in their stead I beheld the horrors and the hypocrisy of society. I soon learned that what I had believed of marriage and society was the nearest sham, a cloak made by their devotees to hide the realities and to entice the innocent into their snares. Victoria Woodhull. To make matters worse, she soon became pregnant and gave birth to a son, Byron, who had a severe intellectual disability, a condition which she would come to blame on her husband's drinking and the non-consensual sex that the child was conceived in. Science wasn't exactly her strong suit. When it became clear that Dr. Woodhull wasn't able to support them, she took her family to San Francisco to find work as an actress and cigar girl. This is where it was rumored that she worked as a prostitute, though Victoria denied this. However, it was a reasonable assumption, as there was little other way for a woman with no education to support herself, her child, and her husband on a single income. Victoria stayed until she, as she claimed, heard the voice of her sister telling her to "Come home, Victoria!" And so she did. Once home, Victoria joined forces once again with Tennessee, known as Tenny, to become traveling psychic mediums and spiritual healers. However, the 2 young and attractive ladies were continually run out of town on suspicion that their healing was a front for selling sex. During this time, Victoria had another child, a girl she named Zula. Through her mediumship, Victoria met many men and women who felt safe confiding in her and discovered she was not alone in her marital woes. She met countless others who felt miserable and trapped, especially women who had to endure sexual relations and endless pregnancies with men who they no longer loved, but whom they couldn't leave for financial reasons. And despite her otherworldly powers, Victoria was powerless to help them. Or so she thought. Then one day, a Union Civil War veteran and spiritualist named Colonel James Blood came to visit Victoria for her clairvoyant gifts. During their session, she passed into a trance and announced unconsciously that their futures were to be intertwined together in marriage. Never mind that they were both already married. Blood apparently agreed with the idea, for, according to Victoria, they were then married on the spot by the powers of the air, which I'm pretty sure is spiritualist speak for they banged. Divorce, especially one initiated by the wife, was extremely uncommon in the 19th century. Though it was allowed on certain grounds, the social stigma that would inevitably follow was enough to keep women in the most miserable of marriages. However, Victoria looked at her constantly inebriated and useless husband, who spent any penny he made on other women, and thought, "Why should I live any longer with this man?" With Blood's help, she was able to divorce him, and she and Blood lived together as husband and wife via common law marriage. They signed a marriage license, but the minister sort of forgot to file it. And in another act of rebellion, Victoria kept her name. Blood was a spiritualist, and spiritualists believe that marriage should be between equals. As Victoria was way less educated than Blood, she had a lot of catching up to do. He helped to fill in the gaps in her learning, including teaching her about women's suffrage and free love, a relatively new and revolutionary belief that one should be free to love whomever one chooses for any length of time without interference from the law or anyone else. Victoria soaked it all up. She saw women's restrictions in the voting booth and restrictions in the bedroom as inherently linked, and once she made the connection, was desperate to be a part of women's liberation. But how? The answer came in a spiritual visitation from the Greek orator Demosthenes. According to Victoria, he told her she was to move to a specific address in New York City to begin her work for women's suffrage. Further details to follow. Whether this encounter really happened, we'll never know. However, at a time when women's ambition beyond homemaking was demonized, it is reasonable to believe that Victoria felt she needed spiritual backing in order to justify taking action to realize her dreams in the public sphere. But how was she to survive in New York City, get the attention of Washington and the suffragettes enough to make a difference? And how would they react if they ever found out about her past? Victoria had no idea, but the spirits must be obeyed. So off to New York she went, with blood, her children, and her entire screwball family in tow.